Hi, everyone. Welcome to our meeting. We're going to get going in another minute or two. We have several people still joining, so we'll give them a minute. Hey, Jack, while we're waiting, can you do a test and let me know if you can see my screen that I've shared out? Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and get going. Welcome, everybody, to our webinar today. We're going to be doing a live demo of Jira Service Management in the theme of Valentine's Day. We're going to show you why we love this tool so very much. As we're going, we're going to collect questions and address them at the end. So if you have questions, please feel free to use the chat functionality to put those questions into the chat. We'll keep an eye on everything and address the questions toward the end of our session today. Before we actually dive into the demo, I'd like to give you all a quick overview of Atlassian and the Jira Service Management solution, just in case it's unfamiliar to any of you. All right. So StrataCom has been doing ITSM consulting since 1997. We've always focused on enterprise level IT service management. Currently, we're a platinum Atlassian partner for ITSM. The last 10 years, we've been focused solely on Cherwell software. I believe many of you on the call today are using Cherwell software, but as you know, it's going to be end of life. So everyone's looking for a new solution, including partners. So when we went out to find a new partnership, we evaluated all the best solutions out in the marketplace. And what we came across was we believe Jira Service Management is the best replacement for Cherwell out there. It's ranked really high by analysts in all the different quadrants as far as functionality, vision, completeness of tool, so forth. We heard a lot of customers were very underwhelmed by Ivanti's offering and the lack of migration services that were promised free, then taken away. It just didn't feel to us as an initial Ivanti partner that it was a good direction. It was a solution that had momentum, and the leadership and vision seemed to be lacking. And so we were very excited when we began talking with Atlassian about their vision, their momentum for the product. It's very robust. It has a lot of R&D behind it. They're constantly rolling out features. And we believe with the no-code, low-code interface, it's really one of the best solutions out there for replacing Cherwell and much more attractively priced than some of the other options, such as ServiceNow. So in addition to StrataCom, we've got a large consulting team with decades of experience, as I mentioned, within ITSM, and we've got offices across the United States. Getting back to Atlassian, they were founded in 2002 in Sydney, Australia. They've got over 15 products and solutions that they provide and 5,000 plus marketplace apps. Right now, they're currently in about 80% of the Fortune 500 companies and best known for their Jira DevOps solution. So many of you potentially are already using Jira. The Jira Service Management solution was built on the Jira platform and framework. So it's a really nice tie together if you're using Jira or considering it for DevOps and project management side. It's a great tie-in for Service Desk to have everything on the same platform. A few other stats, Atlassian has over 8,000 employees worldwide, 230,000 plus customers, 700 plus partners. So they're definitely one of the bigger players in the software world today. This is a snapshot of one of those industry analyst quadrants I was referencing. This is the Forrester wave from last year, from 2023. And you can see in the upper right, ServiceNow and Atlassian are really ranked the two best. But if you've ever taken a look at ServiceNow, it's a great solution. They can do everything, but it's a very hefty price tag and you end up paying for everything. You really get nickel and dimed. Atlassian has a much more favorable cost proposition, and you can see they're even ranked higher than ServiceNow in completeness of vision and strategy, where they're going with ITSM. One of the things that we really like about JSM is the ability to really do that whole enterprise service management and really move just beyond IT. If you're one of the Cherwell users on the call, you probably know Cherwell had an HR service management module, a facilities management module, but you had to pay extra for those. Those are actually templates that are available to you for free in Jira Service Management. They're pre-built. You can download them and get them installed quickly. Provides a lot of value very, very quickly. You also get Opsgenie. If you're interested in alerting mass notifications, Opsgenie is a great tool that's included for free. A lot of folks are using PagerDuty. Opsgenie would be a direct competitor and included. So it potentially is a solution you could save money on, not having to continue to use that. There's also project templates out of box. There's Jira Work Management that you get included. AI functionalities included. And one of the biggest questions we get is how customizable is it? It's a low-code, no-code workflow editor. You can do all of your workflows in one steps in Cherwell within JSM. It is just as configurable. Getting back to form templates, there's over 300 pre-built form templates you can use and download to get value quickly. Here's just a real quick snapshot, but we'd be happy to share a link with you if you want to explore and see what else is out there to get you value fast. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the customers here. There's a lot of recognizable logos you may be familiar with that are already customers of Jira Service Management. And wanted to point out quickly, there's an interesting webpage in Atlassian where you can see their ROI. They did a study with Forrester about ROI on Jira Service Management, and the study showed that compared to a lot of traditional tools, such as ServiceNow and BMC, you can get about $2 million in cost savings. It's a very good ROI. We won't get into details, but there are studies and calculators out on the web if you're interested in taking a look at that. So with that, I would like to I would like to turn it over to our Jira Service Management practice lead, who's going to be leading through today's demo, Bill Renfro. So Bill, if you're here and you want to do a mic test, I'm ready to turn it over to you whenever you're ready.
I'm here. Yep, I'm here. Laura was probably slightly nervous because I messaged her. I was in a meeting right up until the top of the hour, so I told her to start without me. I'll be there. But do you ever really trust that? I'm not.
All right, so far I see your face lit up, but I'm not hearing any audio.
You cannot hear me, Laura?
Okay, the audio is potentially on my issue. It sounds like in the chat we're hearing. So, all right, I'm going to troubleshoot my audio, and Bill, I'll let you get rolling.
All right. So I've got the chat open. I'm just going to ask one more time. You guys can hear me, right? Okay, multiple people have said yes, so good. So good morning. Nice to meet you all. Thank you for taking the time today. We like to start these demos with just a very basic overview of what JSM is. Laura covered a bit of it. As you can see here on my screen, I have the ticketing system, which we will get into in a moment. JSM also includes a knowledge base, which is called Confluence, and we will go through this briefly and talk about it. It's a knowledge base, so it's not really all that complex. It includes Jira Work Management, which is basically like if you're using Jira software, this is like a light version of that. It's included with the price tag, and Opsgenie, which is the on-call and alert monitoring system, which we will talk about. But typically, when we start talking about JSM, we have to talk about just some terminology. So everyone who's worked in Jira software is familiar with the idea of a project. And a project is normally something that starts at a specific date, like maybe June 1st, and runs for 3 months, and you accomplish some tasks. In JSM, a project the terminology is carried over because it is still an Atlassian product, but a project is a shared workspace. So I might have an IT support project that has all of my IT tickets that we work. I might have an HR project that would have all of the HR stuff. And we can send things. Okay, I did hit share when I started this, so I don't know what happened. My apologies. So as I was saying, so I have an IT project here. I'll back up about 1 minute. So I have my IT project, which is a shared space for all my IT stuff. And I have an HR project that's got all of my HR things in it. And as Laura said, the stuff you're seeing in this demo is all pre-built. So for example, in my IT project, I have a whole bunch of predefined requests in this HR project. They're very typical for HR groups to work with, right? Onboarding, offboarding, et cetera. In IT, we have the same thing. So if we go look at those, in IT, we have many, many more. For service requests, we have many because those are the most common types of requests. For incidents, we have a couple. For problems, we have one, and then changes have several. When we create a new project, and Laura talked about this, we have many templates we can choose from, and every one of these has a whole bunch of predefined request types, forms, screens, and everything. So you're never starting from zero when you implement Jira Service Management. If you have a mature process today and you've been going through working with a help desk solution for years, and you choose one of these templates, like the IT template, there's even an IT Lite template, it's going to give you most of what is used commonly in service organizations around the world. Will you have to add to it? Certainly, of course, but you will not start from zero. But when we start talking about functionality within the tool, I always like to start where the customers start. And that hopefully is in the portal. Of course, they might call in as well. But if we go to the portal, it's very straightforward. So if I am a customer and I'm experiencing some problems and I get to the portal, I see some sticky help topics. So we can control how many of these are shown and which ones. We can do an outage banner at the top. You can see I'm saying Salesforce is out here. But if I need to go in and get help, I just have to click here. And then I'm shown some groups of those request types we just looked at. And they're pretty self-explanatory. We can group these however a customer wants. If they're in a highly specialized field, we'll sometimes have very specific ones, or they might be broader like we have here. So as a customer, I'm having trouble with my computer. So I'm just going to go in to get IT help. And by the way, I know a lot of the people on here are Cherwell customers, maybe not everyone, but I do speak both languages. I worked in Cherwell really heavily. So if somebody has a question about like, we do this way in Cherwell, how's it work in JSM? I can answer those questions. All right. So I'm a customer. I'm having trouble with my computer. I go in here. It's a very easy form editor, a very easy form to fill out. The form editor behind this is very powerful. We can show and hide sections, collapse things, etc., which you were unable to do in Cherwell and in a couple other tools. So then if I had chosen a different type of device in here, I would have gotten a different section. So, but we'll get rid of that. And I'll say I'm having trouble with my desktop, and we'll put an asset tag in here. That's not mandatory for putting this in, and whenever I do demos, I lose the ability to type well. So you'll notice right before I even was able to submit it, it went out and saw if there was any potential knowledge articles that would be matching and displays them. So again, we can do some deterrence, some self-help for people. But if that's not going to fix my problem, I can go ahead, hit send and send this in. So now I can see my ticket and I can see a few other things as a customer. I can see notifications are on. If this isn't high priority for me, I can just turn those off. I can escalate this if it's been a couple days. I could resolve it or cancel it if I figured it out on my own. Let's say this was preventing me from working and my boss wanted to know that, I've put in a ticket and they wanted to be notified when there are updates to this ticket. I could just share this ticket with my boss or anyone in the organization. So once they're added, now if there's a comment on this or a status change, Emma and anyone else I add would be notified. In the upper right, I can see other requests I might have opened. If I click on this, I can see the ones created by me. I'll just open that in a new tab. If I had approvals, those would show up here as well. So if I had approvals waiting for me to take care of, I could go in here and approve or deny them. We will look at how approvals work. But it's important from a cost and licensing standpoint to point out that approvers in JSM do not need licenses. They can go in the portal, do everything, and they don't have that. In Cherwell today, approvers are supposed to have licenses. There's at least one way around that, but we didn't recommend doing it. And as of last week, you can define stakeholders for different services in JSM. And those stakeholders would get notified if there was an issue with a service that was open, and they do not need licenses. So that's really nice. If I had clicked on requests, I would see all my requests. I can go here. I can see all the ones that I've opened. You can see I've been putting cases in here for a long time. I have some filtering options. Because we're doing single sign-on, and I'm the customer that put these in, but because I'm also an administrator, I see this option over here called Customize. Only project administrators and higher would see this, but wrong window. So I see this Customize. This is where I can put that portal announcement. I can change the layout. I can do some branding, put in logos, colors, etc. I can determine which projects to show or hide. I don't have to show every project in the portal. So there are a lot of options. It's very easy for admins to learn, to figure out, and we've never actually spent very much time working on those individually. So now let's go back to our help desk. The customer has put in a request, right? You can see now I'm an agent. I just came in the morning. I'm going to start working on tickets. If I go look at a particular ticket, I see some information, right away up here in the upper right. I can see the status it's in, which is highlighted. It's easy to find. I can see the status actions I can take. In Cherwell, these statuses were just a lookup table. They were just data values sitting in a row in the database, right? In JSM, they actually have properties. So if I go back over here, and I'm just going to go back to my project settings for a moment, and the properties of the statuses and the transitions between them are collectively known as workflows. So if I go look at incident management, for example, you can see there's not very many statuses, but every status has properties. We can do various things with it. And every transition between statuses has properties. So if I look at this one and I hit edit, I can see I'm forcing a screen to come up. I can do more complicated things too. Like I can go in and require fields to be required before it being completed. I can do validations. I can do math if I want to figure things out. All of that is controlled by these transitions and these workflows. It's how we enforce behavior in the tool. And with that and permissions, it's really quite powerful. So let's go back to the ticket. I can move this to in progress. I have the choice of making this a comment internally, like this customer is a pain to work with, or I can respond to the customer. And I'll say working on it. If I respond to the customer, it will automatically send them an email. I get some SLA information up here. SLAs within JSM work almost identically to how they do in Cherwell. You can define 24/7 calendars. You can define business time calendars with holidays, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on SLAs, but I will say the ones defined out of the box fit most companies, and that's the mean time to response and the mean time to resolution. So you can see I have these up here. It shows me when those times would be based on the resolution. I have some auto routing rules set up. So this went to level 1 support and was assigned to Elena Grant. Down here under this section, I see a few more pieces of information. I can see the request type that was put in. I'm tagged as a VIP. Labels are arbitrary. They are used as an informal way for agents to be able to categorize tickets. We have our formal ways in the tool as well. Let's say we had a major outage today. Maybe they would call this, Valentine's disaster or something. They could add that. It's nice to have an arbitrary way to do that in addition to the formal ways. So you can actually search on this and you could find all the Valentine's Day disaster tickets if you wanted. As I mentioned, we have services defined in the tool. So these are very similar to how services work in JS or in Cherwell, but the difference being is they're not tied as the top level of categorization. So we can do infrastructure or whatever. And then it also suggests some knowledge articles. So if I go look at these, and let's just say I found that this one, even though it's a generic one, would probably solve this person's issue, I can go ahead and share that. It automatically puts it in a comment to the customer. And one of the JSM is rolling out new features quite often. One that came out not very long ago was canned responses. So now I don't have to actually type anything. If I'm sending knowledge articles out to people, I can just go ahead and hit my canned response that says, please see the knowledge article. I've got some shorthand in here as a variable. So that put my name in. It said, this should solve your problem. I can hit save. That updated the ticket. Now I think it's ready to be resolved because we've addressed the issue. I can go ahead and resolve this. In the background, some of those transitions are firing between statuses and they're enforcing the rules. So if I try to resolve this right now, this field is not required because I'm trying to resolve it. So I'll just say this is done, it's fixed, and we'll move on with life. So now this ticket has completed its life. That is a very simple type of ticket. I think Laura asked people to hold questions till the end, but I'll just say that if you do have questions, please write them down and keep a handle on them. Let's talk a little bit more now about what an agent sees in here when they're in here working tickets. So they go to the IT service project, and initially they're given a queue. And a queue is just a saved search of any kind. The admins set this up when you create the project. They can be altered over time if you want. Some of them are objective searches. So like all open tickets, everyone would see the same thing here. For contextual searches, like all my tickets, I would see something different than the next person over. And then we have, everything that's an open task, all tickets for America, Europe, and APAC. So these can get set up many different ways. You can see we've got a few others down here, like recent tickets opened, some that are flagged for review. We had our VIP queue. So when we roll JSM out for teams, one of the conversations is always like, how do you want your queues to look? We do have all of these queues are actually exist only in each individual project, but we do have searches across projects too. So if I go all open issues, this shows me everything in every project over time. We can have multiple filters, of course. People can have personal filters and create them. It's, again, just a form of a saved search. But what's really nice about these filters is once you create it, you can make subscriptions. So let's say you are a help desk supervisor. And every morning, by the time you get to work, you want a list of all of the open high priority tickets. You just create the search, you make a personal subscription, and you say, send it once a day at 7 a.m. Or I can assign groups. So maybe my AWS support group wants to see that, or whatever the search is. It's a very useful, very powerful thing, often overlooked in other tools. I actually built that functionality in Cherwell for 3 or 4 separate customers. But again, it's very useful. Go back into the project. One of the things that happens in whatever tool you buy or whatever tool you use is that they tell you, you are going to work in this product in this format. You may have noticed I have a board over here on the left. JSM doesn't force you to work in this format. Some people, especially if they've worked in JSM in the past, or not JSM, in Jira software in the past, would prefer to have things in a board format. So you can actually work in a board format, right? So I can go in here. I could work my tickets if I wanted. I can rearrange them if I want. And then I can move them around. I can move it to closed if I want. So I'll move this one to closed. My transitions in the background still all have to fire. So it's popping on the screen and making sure I've filled this out, which this one was already filled out, but just say this is fixed and we can resolve it. So this is another way you can work. But what if you're a heavy Teams user and you're in Teams all day? So Kevin has sent me this no screen share because my sharing, I don't know if my internet dropped for a second or what, but it stopped sharing. If I'm a heavy Teams user, and this applies for Slack as well, but I'm not using Slack, so I can go create a comment in Jira, or I can create a new issue in Jira right from Teams. So I have access to a large number of sites because we work with customers. You would not see that if you're doing this. I'll put this in our company site. So I'll say, Kevin notified me, screen sharing. I really can't type when I'm doing these. I don't know what the deal is. So wasn't working. And now it's just going to create my issue right in Jira. But so give me that information, right? If I go over into my actual Teams, of course I'm not on the right thing, but just pop over. I can work all of these tickets right in Teams. There's an integration that has to be installed in Teams by your local admins and tied to whatever team channel you have. It's very easy to install and configure, but now I can see the issue we just created. I could go in here and work the issue from here if I wanted. I could open this in full-blown Jira from here if I want. So you have multiple ways you can work and go through the system, and that's been very nice for customers. This Jira work management format where we allow this came out last fall from Atlassian, and the Teams integration came out middle of last year. The Slack integration is out now, and it's worth noting that Atlassian has partnered with OpenAI, and there's also now a smart bot that's out for Slack chat, and the Teams smart bot that's powered by ChatGPT will be out sometime this year. And in general, Atlassian has released more new stuff in the past year and a half than any of the other vendors released in the entire time I worked with them. And I've worked with most of the big ones over the years. So I'm not going to name names, but it is very refreshing to see a company rolling things out all the time. All right, so let's go back to this left column where agents can see things. So if I wanted to see the service requests, there's some saved queues here. Same things for incidents, problems, and changes. We have a change calendar, and I'll expand this out to the month. So we can see if there's conflicts. We can see what's planned out. We can drill into any of these, of course. Get some see some information right from there. We can see the defined services. You can see who the owners of those services are. I'm going to come back to alerts and on-call because that's Opsgenie. But let's go take a look at the knowledge base. So if I look at the knowledge base in here, I can see what knowledge has been defined and is related to this project. That knowledge is actually controlled by Confluence, which is the knowledge base. And I'll show you some of the functionality as we go through. I already showed you how an agent can relate a ticket to an article and how users can see knowledge in the portal. Everything in Confluence revolves around spaces, though. So my IT project is tied to this IT support space in Confluence. Now, I can share spaces across projects. I can give each one their own. We can do multiples. There's pretty much no limit to what you can do. If I go create a new knowledge article, as soon as I put in the title, I'm able to access a huge template library. So you can see knowledge is used in many different ways from Atlassian. They don't want you to only use it for strictly customer-facing knowledge. You might make meeting notes in it. You might make 90-day plans for things. You might take notes for an all-hands meeting. There's just all kinds of templates in here. A change management plan is always nice, but you don't have to use that either. You can do a WYSIWYG editor and create your knowledge this way. I'm not going to fill out this entire knowledge article, but let's go take a look at some that are. So I'm just going to get rid of this one. Let's take a look at some that are already created just to get an idea of what the format is. So you can see in here, close the help. The layout is really nice. You have tables, images, everything. It's really very easy to work in that editor and create nice knowledge articles. So we'll take a look at a couple more. Take a look at a Gmail one. Again, these knowledge articles are very easy to work with. So I think everyone understands knowledge management, how it's used, and I'm trying to be efficient with time during this demo, so we have some time left at the end. If any of you ever want a really, really detailed dive into any of these things we are looking at, I can do that. But for the sake of today, since we're already past the bottom of the hour a little bit, I'm going to move on. So let's go take a look. I showed you the project templates that exist. But if we go back to our project, and if you're in Cherwell and you want to create, let's say, a new incident subcategory, you have to go make the new incident subcategory record, and then you'd create a specific, possibly, not always. You had to tie the two together, you had to do the form editor, then you had to publish everything. It could be quite time consuming. I worked on one project for a year that had dozens of forms, and I think we published 700 blueprints. It was a lot of work. If I want to add something in JSM, we first start looking at the issue types. And issue types are, at the top level, the simplest way we classify a request. And usually we don't have to add a lot of these. We can add them, but we cover the ITIL process areas of change, incidents, problems, service requests with approvals. And then we've added a few more: employee setup, because we cross over with HR sometimes, simple task, and subtask. The difference between these two is that subtasks always have a parent, as we'll see in a little bit. Request types are a little more complex. We kind of looked at these briefly, but if I want to add a request type in here, I can go over to create request type and create from a template. And the numbers in here keep going up. Atlassian is always adding stuff. So if I go look at my IT, I've got 14. And if I look at this, you can see this is similar to the one that I filled out earlier. So if I wanted this, I could hit select. I could save this, and now it would be out there. I'm going to have the form ready to go. All I would have to do on top of this is relate it back to whether or not I want it visible in the portal. And that's done through forms. When I was working in a ticket, let's go back for a second, and I promise this is relevant. I'm just going to discard my draft in here. When I was working in a ticket, like one of the questions people always have is like, how hard is this to customize? If I just want to change a layout and I'm an administrator, I can just go into the screen. If I wanted to add a field, I could just drag it in and drop it in. If I want to reorder, I can do that. If I want to get rid of it, I can drop it off. So this description, the request form is the main center section, and the context fields are the upper right-hand section. So then I could do the same thing here. The terminology in JSM is that this is a screen. Forms are slightly different. Now you might ask why, like what is the point? But when we talk about forms, They work differently than things do in Cherwell and other products. So in Cherwell, if you get a specific kind of request, you get exactly one specific to fill out, and that's it. If you need a different one, then you have to make a new request. When we go look at forms, we've got a few defined in here. If I want to create form, again, I have a huge template library of these. There's 217 right now. That number keeps going up. I look at the IT ones. I've got a whole bunch of predefined ones. Now, most of these, I'm not going to add this in right now because I have some of these out there, but we'll go take a look at one. This Get Help is the one which I filled out when I was a customer. And you can see the editor for the forms, very similar to what we saw in, in Confluence. The editor is very similar. We can do different layouts, and we can hide and make visible sections. So like right here, the first thing I have is, what are you having trouble with? And I've got some predefined things in the dropdowns. And then my very next thing is only show this section if they chose my device. And then this section ends down here. And then there's another section if I chose something else. If we want to add options to these lists, it's very easy. We just go in here, type them in, and hit the plus. If we're in a ticket, let's go back into some ticket. And let's say the user hasn't given me all the information I need. I can just go in here and hit add form. I can choose my form, add it. So now they have the form that we were just looking at. I can reply to the customer and say, hey, fill this out. Maybe I have a scenario, though, where I have more than one form. Let's say it's an HR case where I got married or I had a life event, like I added a kid to the family or something, and I need to do an insurance form, and I need to do a benefits form, and I need to do a tax form and all that. We can add multiple forms to any single request. So if I do add form here again, I could choose a different one, and add it to that. And I could give the user, the customer, every single thing they need to fill out and keep it in one request, which is really nice because otherwise, I know in other systems we've had to do multiples. It's a lot of overhead for the person entering the tickets. Here, it's much, much easier. All right, so I am going to shift gears now a little bit because there's a few more things I want to get through. We have not talked about assets at all. And of course, Jira and most, if not all, of the ITSM tools out there have a CMDB on the background. So if I go up on the top and I look at assets, you'll see this demo environment has a generic, basically asset environment. So I can see my IT employee assets. If I go in here and see we have some models defined for different things that we support, and then we have actual assets that are assigned to people. This is, of course, dummy demo data. It's not really real, but our company, StrataCom, has actually run the free asset scanning tool that comes with JSM called Asset Discovery. And if I go look in our asset library, these items in here were all imported by the Asset Discovery tool. We can also bring data in through SCCM or Intune or basically any scanning tool you have, or we can import it from like APIs. Dell, for example, if you buy a large quantity of computers for them, have an API where you can get all the data. So this scan actually scanned all these computers. Big Dog is a physical server that runs a bunch of VMs. Everything else I think you see under here is a VM. You can see it got, its uptime, the amount of RAM, the model of the computer, the serial number, all this stuff it got out of there. It also pulled 4,000 some application services that are running out there. And I can see an object graph in here that shows all of the connections. If I unlock this, I can move things around and reorder them if I want to just get it more visible. But this was all done with tools included with JSM. Now, how would you use these tools to support customers, right? Like what do you care? Like if you've never worked in that scenario, I'm just gonna get out of here and we're gonna put in a new request here in our IT. It'll be a service request and it'll be a customer doing an entitlement check. So we'll just say Duncan wants to know what devices he has. I mean, he should already know that, but so we'll go find Duncan in the list. I could have typed ahead there if I wanted to. Description's always required. We can default it to things, and that's enough for this. So now I can create this. If you worked with Cherwell at all, there's an automation engine, and we have the same thing here in JSM. So I have an automation that runs in the background, and it simply, when looked at the assets that are assigned to Duncan and related them to this ticket. So now I, as the agent, don't even have to do any work. I could just send it back to Duncan and say, look at your ticket, the stuff's there. Or I can use this to troubleshoot, perhaps. I can see he has a phone, he's got a laptop that's pending purchase, and he's got a ThinkPad that he's been using for a while. So there are many different ways to work with assets. One of the ways we've worked with it is we have a barcode scanning add-on, and we worked with a very large school district that had over 20,000 students. And then on the first day of school every year, they scanned out 15,000 iPads, and on the last day of school, they scanned in 15,000 iPads. And they were able to do it efficiently using a combination of JSM and our scanning tool. And it's worth noting that they had previously used Cherwell, so we were able to support that in both cases. So the automation engine is used for a bunch of different scenarios. So let's go look at an actual customer scenario that we had working with a government customer. So the requirement for the government customer we had was that when a new employee was onboarded, they had to get a bunch of stuff ready for them, right? But we couldn't do any of that until that employee went through the IT security and the HR sensitivity training. So I'm going to add my brother. So we'll say he's starting next Friday. We'll fill out a few pieces of information about the person, where they're going to be assigned, what kind of employee are there. In a real life scenario, we would probably have more detailed items. Got ahead of myself a little bit there. And I'll just say he's an actuary. So he has standard equipment, and his manager is going to be Elena Grant. And we'll say get his stuff going. So now I can send this in. I'm probably a supervisor submitting this, or manager perhaps, on behalf of my new employee. Now, nothing has happened in this ticket yet. As an HR agent working this ticket, I would communicate with the new employee, make sure they took the training and passed the training. And then I could go in here and go to my security training passed and just say yes. By the way, you'll notice that I never have to hit save in here, like ever. Sometimes I have drop downs where I have to hit a confirmation checkbox just to make sure I really wanted to do it. But when I refresh this, now that I've changed that, scroll down a bit, you can see my automation has now set things up. So the facilities has to get a new desk. We have to get an office badge, create new accounts for IT security. Telephony needs to get them a phone, and hardware needs to get them a laptop. It's really powerful. You can do many, many things with the automation editor, yet at the same time, it's really simple to understand. So we're going to take about a 2-minute look at that, and then I'm going to move on to Opsgenie. So if I go look at automations, I have an automation in here. It's called Create ESM Tasks. How does this work? Well, every automation starts with a trigger. Sometimes that trigger is a manual run. Usually it's looking at the record to see if it meets conditions. So in this case, it's saying in the HR project, if security training passed, ever changes. And then there's an if statement saying changes to what? We only want to consider it when it says yes. And we have another statement in here I'm going to come back to, but then we create a new request in a different project for facilities, and we link it to the issue. That repeats for all of those other items in there that you saw in the list of subtasks. And then at the very end, Jira and JSM have something I haven't seen in any other product. We have something that's essentially metadata that is unique to each record, and it's called entity properties. So in this case, I'm creating a new entity property called security training finished, and I'm setting it to yes. And the reason I'm doing that is because I only ever want this to run once. What if somebody said somebody passed the security training and then they accidentally switched it back to no and they switched to yes? I don't want to create all those tasks again. And that's what this conditional was doing. It was looking at the entity property I created, just making sure it's never run before. So we can control things in there. And by the way, we can do very complex variables and work with JSON arrays and things in here too. So the very simple rules, easy to understand. We can make very complex rules with branches that, if then, do this, else. It can do everything that the Cherwell automation can do, and I think a little bit more. So if we're having problems with it, we've got an audit log on here, which I desperately wanted for Cherwell. You always had to either create a history record or show pop-ups or something. So I can see the details when this ran. It worked fine. If there was a problem, I don't have any problems in this one apparently, I would see that there too, and it makes it very easy to troubleshoot. So Okay, I know I've been going at a fast pace. I'm now going to close a few tabs here. I just switched over into a different instance of Atlassian because when I demo this, it sets off my cell phone and my email and various other things. So Opsgenie is the on-call alert management system. If we go into Opsgenie, the first thing we see in Opsgenie are all of the current alerts, all the open alerts. We can see closed ones, we can see unacknowledged ones, but these alerts are all tied back to a team. So you can see this alert ties to the StrataCom admins team. We define those teams in here. It's basically the first implementation task is to define the teams. We can see this team, not a realistic team. It has 2 members, me and Kim. I can override if one of us is going on vacation, for example, but we just switch back and forth every week as being the on-call person. I can add team members very easily. We have escalation policies. When an alert comes in, it goes to whoever's on call. It's not acknowledged in 5 minutes, it goes to the next person. At 10 minutes, it goes to everybody. So how do alerts come in? There's a series of integrations that are possible. So at the very simplest level, there's email. This method of alerting has been around as long as I have been, which is quite a while. I think the first time I saw email alerts was probably the mid-90s. So this is a very, very simple method of alerts. You can take any other monitoring system, tell them to email this address, and it will. So actually, if I go in, and I think I have one ready to go. Yes. So I can just hit send, and now in a minute, we'll see that it came in. There's other integrations too. So I have my JSM integration. This is a full 2-way integration between JSM and Opsgenie. So if I create an issue in JSM, it'll create an alert in Opsgenie, and it goes the other way as well. And then we have other integrations. If I add them in here, there are many, many predefined connectors out there for doing heartbeat monitoring and real-time analysis. If you have something that's an enterprise system, it most assuredly can connect to it. It typically needs something like an API and a secret key or some combination of a URL and an API key or a secret. I have this Azure OMS integration, and it's not fully configured yet. You can see it's not turned on either. Every single one of those integrations that's out there gives you the detailed instructions that you need to go make this all work. I chose this one to put in demos because it's a little more complex. So you can actually see you're not just dropping in a URL and an API key. You have to do all of these things. And Atlassian has documented all of this stuff out there. So there's many integration points possible. Heartbeat monitoring is possible. Some of the things in here are being deprecated. Opsgenie was at one time a standalone product, and you were able to do incident management within Opsgenie, for example. So people could do these breakout rooms for incidents, but that's being deprecated now. That's being integrated to JSM. You can do some analytics, but anyway, let's go look at it coming from. Just going to go to my instance. We'll create a new request in here. So I'll create an instance. We'll say outage. Now the rules that I have established are that it will create a issue or an alert in Opsgenie if it's a high ticket, high or higher, but we'll make this high. And we'll mark this as a major incident as well. You can see now there's a tag for major incident up here at the top. Now what should have happened in the ideal world is this should have created an alert in Opsgenie. So, and you can see it did. So that's there. I could acknowledge it in Opsgenie. Most people who use Opsgenie don't actually go into here. There's a mobile app that you would use. But if I was back in the ticket, there's also rules that if I acknowledge this, so if I move this to work in progress, I put in a comments. So just hit mute for a second. Sorry, I've been talking nonstop and I just needed a short drink of water. My apologies. So now if I refresh this, it should be acknowledged. Everything was going so well up until now too. So this polls every minute. It probably just hasn't updated yet. You can see this other one though. You can see it was acknowledged from Jira behind this. So I could close this alert if I wanted. I could work with it. When the JSM case closes, it should go ahead and clear this out as well. Okay, I just galloped through a whole lot of things. I didn't actually do every single thing I wanted to. We could have spent more time on several different things, but we have about 5 minutes left, and I would like there to be some opportunity for questions. And like Laura has mentioned in the beginning, if you guys ever want to do a deep dive into any of these things, please just ask Laura or ask Jack. So I'm just checking the chat to see if we have questions.
We did have one question that came in about a half hour ago, Bill, from Stacy there. But please do enter your questions now since we only have one. We don't have a lot of time to fill. So if you have questions, now is a great time before we hang up to get those questions in there. Or if you want to follow up one-on-one, you can email me directly or put it in the chat that you'd like a follow-on conversation and we'll reach out to you. All right. I just
So
see
can
another
KB
one.
articles? Yeah. So somebody asked if KB articles can be connected to SharePoint. They can be. It's not a usual use case. So if you wanted it to live in SharePoint and then actually be in Confluence as well, there's APIs to do that. We're actually doing that for a customer starting tomorrow. We're kicking off that portion of the project. And so we're doing it in that customer as a one-time process, just to move everything out and move it into JSM to manage it there. There's no reason you couldn't have that be like a nightly update or something. But that would be a little bit of custom development using the APIs, which are fairly robust for the record. All right. I think the other questions that were out here was about, that was just when I was having trouble with the screen share. So
the other question that came in above, Bill, was can the create an issue work with WebEx IM?
I'm pretty sure it can. I haven't done that, but WebEx I know has a fairly robust APIs. Those automations that I showed you, we can trigger them on like creating an issue. So if you're creating an issue and maybe it was a high priority or something where you wanted to get that information into WebEx, we would just do an API call.
And I did do a quick Google on this earlier, and WebEx has a page where they talk about their Jira integrations. So it definitely looks possible.
No, even better. So it's probably well documented then.
Mm-hmm. I believe so.
Is there somebody in Atlassian whose job is to just document the snot out of everything? They have so much. You have actually, we sometimes have the opposite problem in Atlassian than we do with like other things, which is you go search for something and then there'll be many results. So are all the models presented part of the JSM search? Yes. JSM includes the ticketing tool, all of the templates, the knowledge base, Jira work management, and how did I do that? And Opsgenie. There's nothing extra in the licensing. The licensing model is, I don't know how to unhighlight this. Okay, I need to highlight it more. So we have built a tool using the APIs in JSM and Cherwell to migrate data out of Cherwell into JSM. We do not charge for using that tool. We just charge for whatever time it takes to do the move, which usually isn't terribly a lot. We have to do some, like for the current project I'm on, we budgeted 28 hours. Can I explain limitations encountered by moving from Cherwell? Dashboards work differently. Like behind the scenes, the gadgets that they use. I didn't even get to dashboards, my apologies. But when we look at dashboards, I go back into these. This is all structured slightly differently. These are all called gadgets. You add them to the dashboard. When you create the dashboard, you can edit them. But there's not one-to-one parity in how dashboards work in Cherwell to JSM. We can rebuild the same equivalent or teach you how to build it because this is much easier to learn than the Cherwell dashboard tools. But those I don't believe we can migrate. And somebody else had put in here, how do licenses work? The biggest difference between Cherwell and Atlassian is that Atlassian is named users. So you will need more licenses with Atlassian than you do with Cherwell. But with the break in price, it often comes out to be a better deal or even. It really depends on how your company works and how many licenses you would need. And the licensing is in tiers. Laura can explain that more, but let's say you needed 60 users. The tier for 60 users is 50 to 100. So you would buy that up to 100 users and you would be able to add users over time if you need to. Laura and Jack can both explain the licensing at that level a lot easier. They do a lot of quotes for people so they can, if it comes to money, I'm usually not in the conversation. Let's just put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll follow up with you directly to help you get an understanding what the price would be like for you. Bill, I think I saw a couple more questions just pop in, and I think we might have missed one up above that was kind of buried up above. Did you answer this one yet? What kind of AI features exist? Any level 1 or less automated ticket processing capabilities?
So that's coming in Teams. The chatbot is there. The AI capabilities that exist now are mostly in Confluence and in some in the working tickets in JSM, like you can have it summarize things or suggest things. They are adding features to that constantly. Are there other modules that customers end up purchasing? There's not other modules exactly unless they decide to go all in on the Jira suite. We've had a couple of instances now where they're like, well, we're using JSM. We might as well switch to Jira for software development tracking too. So that has happened where people want to consolidate things on the product. The other thing that happens is that JSM does not try to solve every use case in the world. Let me give you an example. For the portals, you get one per project, and they all show differently. Maybe you want to segment those. So in the Atlassian marketplace, there's add-ons you can purchase for very specific use cases, and they actually work, by the way, unlike some of the things that were in Cherwell's map store. And they're supported. They are not super expensive. Most of them are very affordable. Can you track projects similar to ITPT and Cherwell? Working on it. You can get most of the way there right now. There is actually a PPM equivalent. So ITPT was the first version of project tracking in Cherwell, and then they came up with PPM. There is a PPM equivalent in Atlassian called Align, and to be honest, it is a monster of a product. It is rather expensive, and it's meant for very large organizations. If that's you, it may be a good fit. We, as a company, have recognized that there is a bit of a gap with PPM and the people coming from either ITPT or PPM coming to JSM, and we are building a solution for that ourselves. So that is not done yet. I think it's about 80% of the way. We've had multiple customers ask us that specific question, so we have chosen to address it on our own.
Great question. That is a common one. I'm glad we addressed that. I don't think we've missed any of the questions in the chat here, and I don't see any additional ones. So let's leave it open for another 10 or 15 seconds. If you have any other questions, please enter it now before we wrap up. We did record today's session, so we'll be emailing it out. It takes usually a few hours for us to be able to convert the video, download it, and then get up onto our website. So by later this week or early next week, look for an email from us with today's recording. Feel free to share it with your team, so forth. And again, if you want a one-on-one deeper dive with our team, please reach out to myself or Jack. We'd love to visit with you.
Yes, thank you very
right.
much, everyone, for your time.
Well, I don't see any other questions, so I think that'll be a wrap for today. Thank you so much. I hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon.